Clear Voices of Hope is a powerful collection of voices from For the Love of Cups, Clear Pathways program, dedicated to raising awareness about the realities of dense breast tissue and breast cancer. Through honest conversations and personal stories, we amplify the voices of women who have faced these challenges firsthand, sharing their journeys, fears, triumphs, and lessons learned along the way. Each episode brings you closer to the lived experiences of survivors, advocates, and caregivers, while also featuring leading experts in breast health and women's health. Together, we break down the barriers, provide vital education, and empower listeners to make informed decisions about their own breast health. Whether you're navigating your own diagnosis, supporting a loved one, or passionate about women's health equity, Clear Voices of Hope is your source for real stories, reliable information, and a supportive community. Join us as we shine a light on the path to early detection, better care, and hope for every woman. Welcome, Jamie Vaughn, to Clear Voices of Hope. I am really excited to welcome you to the show today for many reasons. One, because you're a fellow advocate, nonprofit founder. You got into this work much like me after a diagnosis and just a deep desire to help other women that might also face these same challenges. And so personally, it's good to connect with somebody who's walked a similar path and that way led to this type of work. But also, you've got a really powerful story to share and experience, and the way that you have approached your life after diagnosis and the changes that you had to make. And I think you share some really relatable and useful wisdom, not just for women that have been diagnosed with breast cancer, but really anybody that's facing a big challenge or curveball in life. So welcome to the show. Thank you for taking time to be with me. I'd love to just give you a moment to say hello and introduce yourself.
Oh, well, hello, Lisa, and hello to your audience. I am really excited to be here and that we've gotten to connect. This is actually one of my favorite things to do, is to meet people from all walks of life, all over the world. And you and I, were able to connect, and I love telling my story, and I love having other people tell their stories on my podcast, Test Those Breasts. And so I appreciate your having me here.
Yeah, thank you. Exactly. So we are doing a podcast swap, and as Jamie mentioned, hers is called Test Those Breasts. So I think it's very obvious, but it goes beyond that, right? There's so much more to it than just testing your breasts. And I think you've really built a beautiful community and podcast around what survivorship is really like and bringing in all the experts and such. So let's dive into your story a little bit, if you don't mind, and tell us a little bit about maybe your life pre-cancer diagnosis and what led you to discovering that you did have breast cancer.
Gosh, wow, that's a really great question. It's one of the questions I tend to ask survivors on my podcast, because most people who are survivors, they do think about their sort of quote unquote past life, right? Because we really do change in significant ways. For me, it was for the better, but it took me a while, and I'm still working on it to try to kind of come to terms of who the heck I am now. And so before breast cancer, I was a mover and a shaker. I was a school teacher. I taught social studies for 20 years in our school district. And, anyone that knows what the jobs of a teacher, it's pretty busy. And so my calendar was extremely full. On top of that, I always had a side business of some sort and a side job. So, because I just needed more to do at every moment of my day, right? So I was a dog mom, still a dog mom, married to my wonderful husband since 2005. We just had a really busy life. I've got 3 stepkids, 2 granddaughters. When I was going to retire back in 2022, I was super excited. I was just really busy, just kind of coming into home plate. And in hindsight, I do recall having some symptoms. I was no stranger to going in and getting my mammograms and ultrasounds, knowing that I had dense breast tissue. I had had 2 lumpectomies in the past that turned out to be benign. So I was really good at taking care of my breast health. Then, a couple of days before my retirement party in June of 2022, I got a little ping on my phone, and it said, "Hey, time for your mammogram." And so I picked up the phone immediately. My husband and I were actually out front having a beer after work one day, and I said, "Hey, I just got this notification that I need to make my appointment." And so they made my appointment for 3 weeks down the road because insurance, you can get one per year. My
Mm,
previous one was late June of the year before. So I made my appointment and they asked me, like they should always ask you, do you have anything different? Have you felt anything or whatever? And I said,
yeah.
no, no. And so we made our appointment. I hung up the phone and my husband looked at me and he says, yeah, that's not true. And I looked at him and he says, you do feel a lump and you have felt zingers and hot spots. And I said, oh my God, you're right. Whoops, And so I picked the phone back up and I said, yeah, that's not true. I actually do have a lump that I feel. I always have lumpy boobs, but this one feels a little bit different. And I do have some zingers and hot spots. So they moved my appointment back up like by 3 weeks. So I had my retirement party, and 3 days later, I went in to get my mammogram and ultrasound. And the doctor called me back into his office immediately, and he had these big screens up and showed that I had these groupings of calcifications and an associated mass and wanted me to go in and get a biopsy right away. So I went in that Friday and got my biopsy. And by Saturday, the next day, I knew that I had breast cancer. So
Wow.
it was a great retirement gift. Yes,
It's like, well, now that you have time to deal with this here, we
Yeah, we had
saved
all
it.
kinds of other plans, Lisa. We were going to go
I'm
traveling. We were going to do all the things. We were so excited, but breast cancer had another for me, I guess.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said though, when you're on the phone with your care provider and they're asking you these questions. I find myself doing that too. I'm like, no, I'm good. Everything's fine. And same thing, I'll have those gut checks like, wait a minute, why did I just say that? Because I am fine. I feel fine in that moment, but forget that like every morning I'm probably thinking about this thing that's in my breast that I probably should get checked up on. Or oftentimes it is a loved one, usually my daughters that are like, Mom, you got to speak up, say something, which is weird because this is what I do and preach for a living, but we all do it. It's kind of a natural response sometimes when you're caught off guard a little bit like that and
Well, like
just
you
kind
just
of going
said,
through the motions.
I was always the one who tells my husband, "Hey, you need to go get that checked out. Hey, you need to advocate for yourself." And here I am doing that, but my mind was on Saturday's party
Yeah.
and like being super excited that I was almost at the very last day of my job. And so,
Yeah.
so it just wasn't. And I also thought in the back of my mind, you know what? I'm going to go in 3 weeks.
hmm
So if they find something, they find something. Not a big
And you can
deal.
address things then. Right, exactly. And you're like, I can address whatever's in my mind then.
Yeah.
But I'm glad they got you in quickly. It's nice when they can get things moving along like that.
Well, I actually had someone who was my radiologist that wasn't there that day, but he is a very good friend of ours who has done my mammograms, reading my mammograms and things like that. He was able to get me that appointment. So I just happened to be friends with the right person to do that. It's not always like that.
No,
So
it's not.
otherwise, I would have had to wait for like a week and a half thinking about all of this stuff. But he's the one that moved it up. He's the one that read the results. He's the one that called me 24 hours later. So I was very, very grateful for that.
Yeah, that is nice. It's really comforting. I wish everybody could get that type of response because the waiting is hard. And I want to also just check in because you mentioned, just how quickly your life had changed. You had all these plans. I know I can relate, and certainly any survivor out there can relate. Life before cancer, life after cancer. And those moments where you're just, you don't even know where to start and what you have to let go of. You don't even really comprehend it quite to the extent that you're going to have to in that moment. I know for me, I really resisted it. I thought I'm going to deal with this I thought it was going to take like maybe 4 days off work, go have a surgery and be back. I'll see you Monday. Really misguided, right? I was still in that mindset of like, I can just power through anything. And I didn't really want it to change my life or alter anything. And I didn't want to have to stop and, all the things, right? Like we all have our story. I had kids still in the house, and I honestly just thought, I have no time for this. Big ego of me thinking I'm just going to, take it off the calendar and say, I don't have time for this, cancer. But in truth, though, I want to tap back into, kind of how that went for you and your husband.
Yeah, I was so frightened. It was extremely, I went through all of the emotions. I was angry, so angry, because I had worked so hard to get through to the end of my career, to start another part of my life. And once I knew that it was stage 2, and I went in and talked to my oncologist and my surgeon, and that I had to have chemotherapy, I was like, I couldn't imagine myself having to dive into this deep, dark hole. That's what I felt like I was doing, is diving into this deep, dark hole, and how that was all going to turn out. It wasn't that I was concerned about my life per se. It was just a huge, scary inconvenience to me. And which, duh, it is an inconvenience.
Yeah. I relate to the anger, though. That was my first reaction too. I was really angry. I
Yeah.
told everybody, I was like, don't expect me to be inspirational. I was really mad about it.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what I did is I'm a digger into find out more. I was really glad to talk to one of my really good friends, Stephanie, who had had breast cancer several years prior. And she had gone through a mastectomy and reconstruction and everything. One big piece of advice that she gave me is don't Google anything. She says,
Wow.
do not get yourself to go down the rabbit hole, because she goes, it'll scare the bejesus out of you. And so that is one thing that I really actually did listen to. And then we started talking about nipple tattoos, the 3D and 4D nipple tattoos that she told me that she got. And she goes, I'm just kidding. You can Google that. You got to Google that and see what that looks like. It's so cool. So I did, because I was really curious what it would look like. But
Yeah.
I was extremely fearful, and I embraced the fear, Lisa. I walked right into it and allowed myself to feel it all. I mean, I remember it's important for people to know that when you're first diagnosed, you don't even know what's up and down. You need to,
Yeah.
like, every appointment that you go to, it's super important to really try to take someone with you, whether it's a significant other or a friend, because when you're listening to the doctors, it's hard to absorb all of that. It's extremely overwhelming, as you know. There's so much to know. And I personally thought I knew a lot about breast cancer, and it is astounding how much I didn't know and still learning. And so my husband came with me, and he took very copious notes. I mean, I took his notes that he took every day.
hmm
We came home, I read his notes and absorbed them, and then I created my updated blog, because I was very open with my story on Facebook and on Caring Bridge. And so I was able to put together what was happening based on his notes. So that was amazing.
Yeah. I think that's really wonderful advice. I don't want to skip over that. Having somebody with you is a game changer, even if you don't think you're going to need them, even if you think, oh, it's just a follow up, or it's just a simple this, or I'm just checking in. I still try to pause people. Let's not just anything this. Let's really just commit to just being there, even if it is just a simple appointment. I know for me, it made a big difference, because I was always a little bit caught off guard with how maybe just triggered or emotional, or just how much anxiety I felt in my body after the appointment that I wasn't expecting, because you kind of hold it together to get through it. But also sometimes something would happen at the appointment that you weren't expecting, and then you really wished you had somebody with you.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That was the story of my life. Every single time I went to an appointment, there was something that I didn't expect. And I tended to be leaving there in tears, whether it be, hey, you need to go to the ER because you're extremely anemic and you need a blood
Yeah.
transfusion, or yeah,
Yeah.
no, we need to do this now, or whatever it was. I always left the appointments pretty sad and crying. At one point, I remember out of all the scans, because you have to get the CT scan, the MRI, the PET scan, the bone scan, all of it. I remember it was before my chemo started, but I had had other scans. And it was the day I was going to get my port installed for the chemo. And I remember driving to my PET scan. My husband was driving and I had my water bottle, and I was just feeling so much anxiety and so much fear and anger because it hit me smack in the head at that moment that this is my life right now. This is
Mm,
going to be my life for the unforeseeable future because I didn't know. And I got
mm.
out of the car and I just had a full blown meltdown in the parking lot. My husband had, I dropped my favorite water bottle. It shattered all over the place. He had to come around the car, pick me up, take me into my appointment. I was absolutely blubbering. And they were super
Yeah.
kind in there. I went in and they gave me the contrast stuff that you use. And I was able to calm down. I called my friend Alex and she, essentially talked me off the ledge, so to speak. I was
Mm.
just so upset. I got that done. Then my husband drove me across town to get my port in, and my surgeon had to put off the surgery for about 30 minutes because I was just not in a good headspace. And she told me, and what had happened was the night before, and this is really important because this will happen to pretty much everyone if you have anyone in your life. The night before, I had a friend of mine reach out to me at about 10 o'clock at night and said, "Hey, I just wanted to, say, hey, I'm really sorry what you're going through. I wanted to let you know that my sister has a friend of a friend who did the Optavia plan. So I had lost weight about a year prior, a significant amount of weight, and I was in the best shape of my life, which totally
Mhm.
smacks down the myth of healthy people can't get cancer. I was very healthy.
Yeah.
And I had done the
Yeah, same.
Optavia plan. It is a plan to lose weight. And she says she did the Optavia plan and she developed this very rare, this very aggressive breast cancer. I just wanted to tell you that that stuff has a lot of soy in it. Just wanted to let you know. And that's all she
Oh,
said to me.
how nice.
And I'm like, I was speechless, but I did respond back to her and I said, yeah, I said, I know that the stuff about soy. And I said, and I actually asked my surgeon, who is very up on nutrition, if that had anything to do with it. And she said, soy is the lowest of the low concerns that we have about breast cancer. Well, she
Yeah.
never responded back to me. And then, right around the same time, my cousin in New York decided that it was a good idea
Mm.
to reach out to me and tell me, Jamie, whatever you do, do not do chemo. Do not do chemo. It's going to ruin your
God.
body. I mean, she was like, you need to get other opinions from all over the place. And mind you, I am very in favor of second and third opinions, right? But this was the day before I was going to get my port, and I'd already had the plan.
Yeah.
And so those
Yeah.
two things threw me over the edge. And
Yeah.
my surgeon was really, really good at calming me down and saying sometimes we have to sort of filter out that noise because you're going to get the noise. And if you're going to be open about your story, you got to filter out the noise.
Yeah, that's actually really good advice. It's the timing of it, right? You're just, I mean, to this day, I get things like that sent to me. And for one, it's just not actually helpful. We know what's out there. Chances are we've already seen it. And I get that these people may be very well intentioned and also coming from a place of their own fear and maybe don't know what to say. And so they think in some way this is a good way to connect with you or something. But honestly, it can be just really triggering, honestly, to receive it. And, there's a part of me that's like, sorry, that's my dog with a squeaker
I love
toy.
it. It's so cute.
It's better than barking. We will take it. In some ways, it suggests that there's a way that we caused this, right? I believe there's certain things that we can do that can definitely give it more opportunities to grow and take hold. We know what, most of those things are. I think for me, it was stress. Like, I have a family history of breast cancer. I didn't think I was going to get it so young, but I know that the lifestyle I was living I was under extreme stress. So my body kind of created the environment to welcome it in, but I don't think I caused it in any way. And so I like to really alleviate that guilt, first of all, for women that are out there thinking that in some way they made this happen to themselves.
But also, we do know that alcohol can be related to it.
Hmm.
Being overweight can be related. 2 years prior, a year and a half prior, I had weaned myself off of so much alcohol because I used to, we used to drink a lot, especially during COVID, and eat a lot, and I gained weight. And so when I was on my weight loss journey before breast cancer, I had weaned myself off of drinking so much alcohol. And then I stopped drinking every day, right? And if I did have something, I was very intentional about 4 ounces of wine, or something like that. So, but yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that we ask ourselves is, what did I do? And I remember people saying to me when they first found out, they're like, oh my God, but Jamie, you were so healthy. You were so healthy. It always confused me because I was like, yeah, I was and I am healthy. And come to find out, that doesn't matter, It doesn't matter if you're healthy. You can still get breast cancer.
Yeah, absolutely. Same. I felt like I was a very healthy person. I still consider myself a very healthy person. I don't get the colds and flus, and if I do, they're not that bad, and all the things. I generally feel pretty good walking around in the world. So it's odd to have those types of projections and comments, sent your way. So what was the turning point for you through this process? You have this realization that you're in this now, right? And so I'm curious, what got you through that moment? I think most of us would define that as our bathroom floor moment. But yeah, if you just want to talk us through that and maybe what the turning point was for you to get through that and see your survivorship journey the way you do now.
Great question. Well, the first turning point was when my girlfriends came over and took me to the hair salon. And I had long blonde hair. And so I had to go through the grieving process of the fact that I knew that I was going to lose my hair. It was the weirdest, like I was so upset about it. And I mean, I had people saying some things, like one of my friends reached out to me and said, oh my God, Jamie, it's just hair. It's gonna grow back. I'm like, don't minimize my feelings on this. No, we get to move through it however we want. But my girlfriends came and picked me up, and I wanted to go get this really badass haircut that I would never do just because, right? But I had a girlfriend of mine who had the haircut, and I loved it so much. I'm like, God, I wish I could do that. So they took me.
I love that.
It was great. It was so fun. And we shaved my head right over here and did a short, it was like around right here. And then we made it all A-line. So,
Oh my
and it
God, I
was
love
so dang cute. I ended up really loving it. Well, then I started chemo very shortly after that, like within the week. And I knew that it was going to start falling out. They said everyone's different. You know how we always hear that everyone's different. We don't know. And that was a really wonderful, what do you call it, cathartic turning point for me, because then I started really embracing the idea of losing my hair. And I, bought all kinds of hats and just to get prepared. I read a book called Pretty Sick. How am I going to move through this and still look okay and feel okay? And so we did that. I started chemo. My hair started falling out about a week later. And I told my husband, I said, look, when my hair starts falling out, that's when you're going to shave it. And so we went up to a place that we go camping, and I took the clippers with me and we shaved my head. And he thought I was going to freak out about it. He says, babe, I don't want to do that. He goes, this is going to be too hard for you. And I go, oh, no, no, no. I'm fine. I have already embraced the fact that this is going to happen. I'm ready. Let's do it. And so we did it, and I ended up really liking my shaved head, and he called me GI Jamie. And he's got, he
Nice.
doesn't have a lot of hair, so we would do selfies together, and I ended up really embracing that. And then, of course, the patching started coming along, and that's when I really started wearing hats and things like that. So that was the first turning point that helped me be able to kind of navigate through the chemo and all of that. The chemo, obviously, as we know, as people know who have been on it, is not fun. It's, you go into the doctor and you come out thinking that one thing, but then it's really the other thing. And it's never a straight line. And you always develop something. Mine was this really rare anemia. And the reason for that anemia was they had discovered another tumor in my body, and it was sitting up against my heart in my thoracic cavity. And it was big. I had no idea that it was there. It was encapsulated,
Wow.
it was benign. And what was happening is my hemoglobin levels were dangerously low all the time. And I had to be sent to ER. I had to get blood transfusions. And my oncologist thought it was an iron deficiency. But what it really turned out to be was the antibodies from that tumor were eating my red blood cells as they were being produced. And I had to go through quite a bit to figure that one out. And that's where second and third opinions came in. So that was my first turning point. The second turning point was when I realized that I could actually put my foot down and make a decision on what kind of surgery I was going to have. And the only reason I knew is because I had 3 little birdies throughout my journey tell me that they had a friend who had the autologous surgery where they use the tissue from your body to reconstruct your breasts. And we don't have that kind of surgery here in Reno. At least we don't have a microsurgeon that lives, eats, and breathes that kind of surgery. And if you choose that kind of surgery, you want somebody who literally does hundreds
Yeah,
of them every year, right? And so,
absolutely.
and I just didn't know. I didn't even know that that was that kind of surgery. So I took it upon myself to put my foot down, and I had to convince my husband that I wanted to go to New Orleans to have this kind of surgery. And it was not easy. It was like pulling teeth. I had to let my surgeon go here in Reno and tell her that I was going to New Orleans to have this other kind of surgery. That was rough. But what I found out of that is that I have a voice, and I've always had a voice, but that was a different kind of voice. I got to advocate for my own body, and I wasn't going to let my husband or anyone else tell me what I can and cannot do with my body.
Mm-hmm.
And that was
Mm-hmm.
that was a huge turning point for me.
Yeah.
Luckily, we
And
look
just to
back.
know that you had other options.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
And luckily, my husband looks back on that. We've interviewed on my podcast about it. And he
Mm.
talks about his anxiety, revolving around that. You're going to fire your whole team here? And then, yes, I am. And he looks back on it now and he says it's the best decision we could have made. I could have made. And so that was that part. But where the biggest turning point came into, Lisa, that you and I've talked about before, is in my survivorship. And I did not realize how much I was going to change in so many ways. My big plan for retirement was I was going to podcast. I had a podcast before I retired called Be That Teacher, and I was going to help pre-service teachers, struggling teachers with their career.
Wow.
And I had already had my podcast out there and everything, but that all changed. I mean, it just went out the window.
Mm-hmm.
And February came along after my first surgery and all the treatments were done. I was still getting blood transfusions and on the, things like that, but it occurred to me that I didn't have a purpose. I didn't feel like I was anyone significant anymore. And
Mm-hmm.
that is the most scary and disappointing, humbling experience that I had. And my husband couldn't understand it. Sometimes
Yeah.
husbands can't understand those things. you
Well,
know?
actually, if you don't mind, I want to pause on that because you would think you actually just said that you really did feel like you had a purpose, right? Helping other teachers, supporting them, but something in you was like, that's not it, right? Because you were actively giving back. You were actively had a vision for how you were going to continue to give back in this community that you'd been a part of for so long. But clearly something was in you that said that's not it. I am curious about that.
Yeah,
Because I think sitting from where your husband's sitting and sitting from where I'm sitting, I'm like, well, it seemed like you did actually have a purpose, but it's
yeah.
different on the inside.
Well, I felt like he had a purpose. Like he had already been retired for a year and then he helped me through breast cancer, but he had all these activities, things that he was doing. He was keeping himself busy. That was his whole point of retirement, is to really, really dig in and find out how he could fill his days and what would make him feel good about life and things like that. I felt that he was there and I just wasn't. And I told him I was extremely depressed. Now, you probably know that many times when we get through these treatments and we're on this other side, if you will, that people are like, God, you should be happy. You're alive. You got through this. You're so strong. And I just didn't
Yeah.
feel that way. I felt like I was the breast cancer survivor,
Yeah.
and that was it. And
Yeah.
I didn't know what the heck I was going to do with my retirement. I had no
Right.
idea because I wasn't going to go back. I wasn't thinking about doing the be that teacher at that time. It had been too long and I
Mm.
hadn't done anything since before retirement. And everybody always asks you, why don't you write a book? Why don't you? And I'm like, I don't want to write a book. There's a lot of books out there. I don't want to write a book. It wasn't up my alley. And I feel like I'm a pretty good writer, but it did not interest me. But I did know how to podcast and I did know how to have conversations with people. And I did know how to create a network. And I really wanted to help other people who had never been diagnosed. And so that is when Test Those Breasts was born. And my husband is the one who named it. I wanted it to be
I
so
love
out
that.
there. The logo is an owl, and the owl's eyes are breasts.
Huh? Nice.
And the owl is my mom's spirit animal. So I had
Oh,
a
that's
former
beautiful.
colleague of mine create that logo. And I love talking to people about advocacy work and
Hmm.
what they're experiencing. I would like to amplify people's stories. I like to amplify not only people's stories, but whatever they're working on in their
Hmm.
survivorship, whether it be a podcast like yours, or whether it be a book that they're writing or whatever, a service that they have. So I really love to amplify those kinds of things. And I got busy. I got to work and I put that thing together and I launched my very first episode in June of 2023, June 11 to be exact, which was the
Wow.
1 year anniversary of my diagnosis. And I
Wow.
released every single week what I was doing all the way up until last February. And last February, I had to take a hiatus and then I had to forgive myself for taking that hiatus, but I really needed it. And I'm back in action. But yeah, I mean, it's been everything to me. And then I've turned it into a nonprofit. So, and
Yeah.
it's all about sharing resources, connecting people together, hearing people's stories, amplifying their stories and their product that they've come out with or whatever for their survivorship. And I also interview surgeons. I've interviewed many, many microsurgeons that do the autologous surgery. I've interviewed oncologists, radiologists, therapists, and it's been great.
I love that. It's so good. And it is therapeutic, but I think it's also therapeutic for the guests, right? To have a place where they can feel seen and heard and not like they're crazy. I think there's so many of us that can relate to that moment when we think we're done with treatment. Obviously for somebody living with stage 4 breast cancer, they never even get to hear those words. But then you're kind of told, okay, get back to normal. And I know that that's a phrase that all of us like throw around. We're like, there's no getting back to normal. What are you talking about?
No.
But then it's that a little bit of an identity crisis because you're like, well, who am I now? You've been, you're facing treatment, whether they say you're done with treatment or you're continuing them. You're different, and your priorities are completely different. Your worldview, the lens through which you see is different. Your energy, like you start making very different choices. And I think sometimes that's hard for family to relate to because they just want to see you be well and get back to normal, and not, they want you well. So, and there's nothing wrong with that. But, like you said, on the inside, you're just kind of like, you're still a little bit of shell shock and you don't know what's next, but you just know there isn't any actually going back. And so what now?
I am a huge advocate for talking about it. And I have been seeing a phenomenal therapist. I actually interviewed her very early on. I started seeing her right after I was diagnosed. One of my friends connected me to her, and she has been the best therapist I've ever had in my life. And I've always been the type of person to, really dig deep into who we are and try to navigate our lives with the help of someone else. And Terry Ann has been that person for me. And not only did she help me through cancer and the first year after retire, she's helped me through a myriad of other things, relationships with my family, just all kinds of friends, all kinds of things. And I still see her to this day. And I just find that even if you're not going through an illness, I really find that if you find the right therapist, they are really, really good at helping you through life. I mean, life is freaking hard. And there are so many things about life, and that it is always helpful to have someone. And I really went through some major depression, and I still go through that depression every once in a while. And it's a normal thing. And I do not condone people minimizing what we are feeling, because I feel like that suppresses it and it doesn't let it out. And when we let things be, when you walk through your emotions, when you're able to talk about it and just sit in it, we are able to move past it, through it anyway. Maybe not all the way past it, but through it so much better. And that, I believe, has helped me get through these past couple of years into my survivorship. I'm so thoroughly convinced that that's what it is.
Absolutely, hands down, couldn't agree more. And have that very same philosophy. And I think what you get out of allowing yourself to go through it is really some of the answers, the existential questions that we have of the how and the who am I. When you're in that moment, right? Things can actually become very clear when you feel like everything else has been stripped away, when you allow yourself to be in it, which is kind of a terrifying place to be. And sometimes it doesn't happen as quickly as we would like it to, right? I mean, you've got some big questions and how and what life is going to be like, and you want to move through that sometimes at a different pace or timeline than you actually are moving through it, which I think is another challenging piece to that, to allow space for it, but then to also have a faith that this will end, this will pass, you won't feel this way forever. There is another side to it. And having that support and somebody to help you normalize that for yourself is extremely powerful.
Yeah. Well, and to trust yourself. I have, like I was talking about before, I've always had a voice. But my voice is very different. I'm going to be 58 next month in October, and my voice is very different. I have realized that I have been surrounded by a lot of misogyny, and most of us have.
Yes.
And I have been able to figure out my boundaries, what I will tolerate and what I will not tolerate. And that has been a big step for me because, I've always been a people pleaser. I've always wanted to be the best wife. I've always wanted to be the best friend. I've always wanted to be the most supportive person. And sometimes the way we react and the way we advocate for ourselves may not come across that way to other people, but it is to you. So I am very true to myself. Once I was able to realize that I could be really true to myself and I may not please everyone, I finally became okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
That's a difficult place for people to get to, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
It's a scary threshold, I guess. But
It
once you
is
realize that
because,
you're able to,
well, that's where the rubber meets the road. You have this realization that this is your life now, life after breast cancer diagnosis, things are changed. We have our bathroom floor moment. Maybe we've got through all these feelings of despair, and now we're like, okay, we're coming through the other side of it, recognizing that we're changed. And then now you got to walk through the world with this, what you're really feeling, and meanwhile people are expecting you to just go back to normal, and you're going, okay, but it's going to look a little different.
little bit different.
It's going to look a little bit different, and it's.
And then I just, just recently, I went into my oncologist, and um, she's funny. We kind of have a love-hate relationship a little bit. I don't hate her, but we have a like, because that's a strong word. Um, we've had some disagreements, and I've had to correct her in a few different things. But I went in to get a checkup, and she went to go and put her hands down my top and feel around. She's not one of those people who's like, can I? She just goes right in, and she's feeling around on my boobs and just to see if there's any, lumps or anything like that. She's like, yeah, she goes, your scans all came out great. All the things that you are doing great. She says, but you need to watch that weight. And I was like, oh my God, I know. And I already knew. But for her to say that to me was just, the thing that I needed to hear, because I knew that I wasn't exercising as much as I should have. I knew that I wasn't eating as, properly as I should have. And I just really kind of turned that around. And so in the past few months, I have been in, I went to Peru with some breast cancer survivors back in April. And
Mm,
before that is when she told me, and I started working with a personal trainer and really starting to feel much better about my body. And then I really upped my game starting in July. And, I've lost weight. My body has gotten back into shape. So I feel better about myself.
mm,
And obviously, we all know that when we get ourselves into a situation like that, we do feel better in our minds as well.
yeah.
So sometimes we just need that push to, kind of get into doing things to make yourself feel better, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
that was
absolutely.
that was another turning point I had. So when you asked me what was the turning point, there are so
Yeah.
many turning points in survivorship.
Well, that could have gone very differently for your oncologist. So that was a very bold move on her part to say it in the way that she said it. But,
Well, she
she
was
obviously
right.
knows you.
I mean,
She
she was
knows you.
right. I
Yeah.
mean, we do know that when we are heavier, we have more inflammation in our bodies. She knows that there is research out there that does directly relate that to diseases and things like that. So, I'm lucky. I'm the type of person that took that and went, okay, I'll get to do something about it.
Yeah, you were ready to go with it. I love that. Tell me a little bit about Test Those Breasts and what you're doing there and what your vision is for it. Because I love getting to kind of see what the inner workings of an organization are, and kind of what your dreams and what your visions are.
Yeah, thank you for asking. That is, Test Those Breasts is very near and dear to me. I just, my biggest audience that I like to pull in are people who've never been diagnosed. And I did have a friend of mine one time ask me, Jamie, why is your audience, why are they people that have never been diagnosed? It's not even on their radar. And I said, that's why, because it needs to be on your radar. I didn't have it in my family. And so I knew that there were a lot of myths out there. One being more people get diagnosed with breast cancer who do not have it in their family than people who do. And I think it's important for people to know that, just because that's the first question they asked me. My friends asked me, is like, do you have that in your family? I said, no. They did a comprehensive genetics test. So when I started it, I realized I really wanted to reach those people. I wanted them to know the signs. I wanted them to know what to expect if they were diagnosed, what questions to ask, what kind of things to do, everything that I went through. And I learned a lot, obviously, through my journey. I really am very thoughtful about people's stories. Do I resonate with them? Does their story resonate with the people that I think it should resonate with? I try to interview and release every week. Sometimes that doesn't happen anymore. I had to forgive myself and tell myself that it's okay that you don't release every single week. But I love it. And the nonprofit part of it is also really to help me keep the podcast going because as we know, it costs money out of our own pockets to run our, platforms and advertising and do whatever we're doing to
Yeah.
keep that going. I have a
Yeah.
website, testtosebreasts.org. I have a registered logo and name, and I went through all of that because I really did want to make it a very legitimate nonprofit. And so the funds go to my education, running the podcast, running my website that has updated resources that I put on
Hmm.
there. And it has been very therapeutic for me.
Yeah. And
We
for
both
many others, I would say.
I hope so. Yeah, I do get
Yeah.
comments. I do get people reaching out and telling me that they really like my podcast, mainly because of the conversational style, kind of like we're doing right now. It's just comfortable. It's just two people chit-chatting about things that are important. And there is such thing as people having PTSD in a situation that we're in,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Every year, we never forget that date that we were diagnosed.
Hmm.
I have PTSD the day that my mom died.
Hmm.
And so I think that when we immerse ourselves into something that matters, something that
Hmm.
grabs at our hearts, and you know that it is grabbing at other people's hearts,
Yeah.
that is so powerful, I think.
It really is. It really is. I think it's really just the most important thing in all of this. Sharing that experience, but also sharing those resources and having somebody that can help you point you towards what those resources are, even like the surgery that you weren't aware that you could have. And, just somebody to bounce things off of, like, okay, here's what I'm experiencing with my oncologist. Is this, where on the scale of normal does this fit? Because you don't have anything to compare it to. And also for somebody that's never been through this, like you said, many of the people that are listening to your podcast and know that you are a resource is really powerful because I'm sure you can relate to this. After a diagnosis, you feel like you suddenly need a medical degree. You're going through so much information. You don't know where to turn for all the questions that you have. And that alone is really stressful, just trying to understand what's happening. And so having a place that you can go, okay, I know I can relate here and I can talk, just get some real world answers to some of these questions is really powerful, really helpful.
It is. And, I'm sure you have people reaching out to you and saying, "Hey, I have a friend of mine who was just diagnosed. Do you mind if I connect her with you?" And I get that all the time. And one of the things that I have on my website under resources are a list of questions that you can take with you to ask when you are interviewing a microsurgeon about the kind of surgery that I had. And I didn't have those questions at that time. But so it was later um, I developed those questions with the help of other breast cancer survivors that I'm still in touch with today. That people can download and or just on their phone or whatever and ask those questions of that surgeon before you make a decision of whether you're going to go with that surgeon, right? And then also we have another piece of it where I talked to you a little bit before we started recording. I'm a very big advocate for women's health. I am an advocate for people being able to get the care that they need. There are things that I am concerned about now, like if I get breast cancer again, am I going to be able to get the same type of care that I had a few years ago, given things that are happening with insurance companies right now. I've got really great resources about insurance and how to handle a denial of a claim. And so anytime somebody calls me and says, "Hey, I was denied for this, I don't know what to do," I've got two or three women that I am connected with that I can say, "Hey, how can I help this person?" I have people who can help people go back and fight that denial. using the verbiage that they use in the denial. And so I've got information on my website about that. But I get concerned. I want people to pay attention to what's happening in our healthcare right now. We do know that cancer funding, research funding has been defunded. We need to pay attention to what's happening and being able to fight these things and use our voice to be able to push back on that, because women have always had to fight for everything, and we have to continue to fight for getting mammograms at a certain age, whether we can get a ultrasound because we have dense breast tissue. We have to fight for those things. So that's another piece that I am very much involved in.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, same here. That is pretty much the heart of what we do over in my organization. And so I love all the overlap. What would you like to leave listeners with?
Such a good question, Lisa. I would say to listen to your intuition. Do not minimize what you are feeling. And do not let other people minimize what you're feeling. They will minimize what you're feeling, but you don't have to let them. And the most important part is for you not to minimize it and listen to your intuition. Know that you are allowed to ask questions. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to get a second and a third and a fourth opinion if you need to. You can ask questions. You can reach out to people who have the resources to be able to help you navigate. And yes, it is hard. I am not going to lie. However, it is important for you to be able to sit through and move through, however you want to do, sit or walk or whatever, through those emotions, because the emotions are going to be there no matter what. Let yourself go through it.
Wow.
Because it's a big deal. It's a big deal. Yeah. Breast cancer, you said, I was like, no big deal. I'm going to go have a surgery and then I'm going to get right back to work. And I have talked to women like that. They're like, yeah, I'm just going to do this. Now, I will say the sooner you are diagnosed, the earlier you are diagnosed, it is, I'm not going to say it's easy because it's not, but we need to recognize that it is a big deal, and no one gets to tell you, including yourself, that it is not a big deal.
Wow, Jamie, this has been a complete pleasure to have you here. I am so grateful for your time and your energy and all the work that you're doing, all the resources that you've just shared with us, even just here. I am going to leave all those links in the show notes to our listeners, including even some advocacy links you can write to your congressional leaders to talk about some of those things that are hot topics on legislation today. I want you to know that those letters matter. So even if it feels like the only thing you can do, I want you to know that that's actually really powerful and meaningful. You are not it doesn't go into the ethers or into the wind. They actually receive those and they do matter. So I'll leave a link to that in the show notes. And yeah, just come back here for the next episode. And also we'll tune into Jamie's podcast, Test Those Breasts, and you will find me there one of these days.
Oh, thank you so much, Lisa. I really appreciate your having me on here. This has been fun.